Greetings, my spooky little cretins. I'm Tom, and welcome to Monster Gab, where we love to talk about classic and vintage horror. Did I really just call you all cretins? That was a bit mean, wasn't it? I'm sorry. In today's episode, I'd really like to talk about The Shining, originally a novel by Stephen King, but mostly recognised as the 1980s classic movie starring Jack Nicholson, directed by Stanley Kubrick. But how many of you are familiar with the three-part TV miniseries made back in 1997? I suppose a better question would be, how does it hold up compared to the movie? Well, let's find out. I already know what a lot of you are thinking, that surely the movie out-trumps the miniseries. It had a much higher budget, and for those who have seen the miniseries, I've not praised it very highly. But I'm going to put things like the budget and popularity into consideration whilst comparing these two. Not to mention that just because the movie is critically acclaimed to be a masterpiece and an iconic gem of a horror movie and loved by many, doesn't mean that everybody feels that way about it. I'm a member of many horror-based Facebook groups and pages, and it's amazing how many people state that they don't like this movie or they consider it to be kind of long-winded and boring. I know, in this day and age, it's incredible that people actually have opinions and that they're even entitled to them as well. Crazy. As well as all that, this series does get quite a bashing, but there are a lot of fans out there who actually prefer the series to the movie. According to my research, Stephen King, who wrote the original novel, was not a fan of the movie directed by Stanley Kubrick. He didn't appreciate many of the changes that Kubrick made to this movie and kind of considered it an insult to his original source material. Now, I haven't read the book. I do intend to at some time. It's pretty big and it has no pictures. But for what I've researched, the series is quite faithful to the original source material. And a big reason for that is because they got Stephen King involved. He was the executive producer and also helped to write the script. Now, I don't want to make this a biased competition, but I will admit that I am a big fan of the movie. And there is one thing that I will say to defend those changes, and that's the fact that just because something works well in one medium doesn't mean it will work well in another. And I've always said that. Now, I know that the book has a massive fan base and a lot of people will say that the book is better than both of these put together. Totally fine. But you must understand that what works in text doesn't necessarily mean it will translate well on screen, and vice versa. Many will say that the movie is more of Stanley Kubrick's vision of the story. He's not necessarily telling the actual story of the novel, but he's kind of based his movie on it. And again, due to the movie's success and huge fan following, you have to consider the fact that maybe those changes were necessary. But guys, that's just my opinion. Don't get all fired up, okay? I'm guessing Stephen King's not going to accept my friend request anytime soon. So, the movie from 1980, directed by Stanley Kubrick, starred Jack Nicholson, Shelley Duvall, and Danny Lloyd. Whereas the series released in 1997 starred Steven Weber, Rebecca De Mornay, and Courtland Mead. Now we need to put these two to battle. Time for a duel. But before we do, let's tell a synopsis. Okay, synopsis. Jack Torrance, played by Jack Nicholson in the movie and Steven Weber in the miniseries, is a recovering alcoholic and has just taken on the job as winter caretaker at the Overlook Hotel in the Colorado Rockies. It's considered to be not a very rewarding job, as the hotel is closed during the winter months, meaning that Jack will be isolated from society during said time, apart from his family members, wife Wendy and son Danny. Jack also wants to become a writer and states that the isolation will be an ideal environment for his work. But the hotel holds a morbid history. Grady, the previous winter caretaker, lost his mind due to the isolation and actually murdered and butchered his own family. In the meantime, it turns out that son Danny, played by Danny Lloyd in the movie and Courtland Mead in the series, has a psychic ability, also known as The Shining. This means that he can connect with other people who share this same ability, but he can also connect with the hotel and the spirits within it. The spirits that are haunting the hotel are upset by the presence of the Torrance family, especially Danny with his psychic abilities. The isolation does so happen to have an effect on Jack, causing him to slowly lose his mind and possibly have history repeat itself. Will they get out alive? What do you think? Do you think that was alright, by the way? I didn't write any of that down, I just made it all up. I know you have light in your face and this DVD's shining and everything, the lighting's all wrong. I'm still learning, okay? I'm an amateur. Okay, so let's talk about some of the major differences between the movie and the series. And the biggest thing that really stands out to me is the character Jack and how he develops within the story. So like I said earlier in the synopsis, Jack is a recovering alcoholic. In the movie, they don't dwell on that too much. It's kind of subtly implied. And we do see a scene later on where Jack is sat at a bar talking to a bartender, and he happens to mention an accident that happened a few years ago where he injured his son. This is kind of a key moment where we see that Jack hasn't got a lot of affection towards his own family. He seems to be quite friendly to the guy who's serving him behind the bar, as well as his employer, but he's quite moody and unfriendly towards his family right from the start. I get the impression that Jack has a kind of grudge to his own family, and the idea of being isolated with them starts to feel like a prison as the movie progresses. Jack does eventually encounter some spirits within the hotel, but they're not the reason that spur on his madness, they're more of an encouragement. Jack's issues do appear to be psychotic, and it seems that the isolation is the key reason that he becomes crazy. And it feels like the madness was always there, it just needed something to lure it out. Jack's character in the series, however, relies heavily on his alcoholism. It turns out that he has some major anger issues due to his drinking problem. We get to see a couple of flashbacks where Jack accidentally injures Danny, although it appears to be more of a case of abuse and he actually breaks his arm. We don't fully see what happens, but we get to hear Jack ranting and shouting, and he is drunk during this time. Another flashback is where we see Jack in his old job as a school teacher beating up one of his pupils. It's quite an aggressive scene, and it really does emphasize how much of a problem Jack has with his anger and his drinking. During the series, we do get to see Jack lose his mind and go into some form of madness, but it seems to be a case of a cocktail of things. The isolation certainly is one of the factors, but I feel like that is more of an issue for his family, the fact that they are trapped there with him during his madness. He also has an encounter with the spirits of the hotel who spur on his madness. But it seems to me that his main issue is the fact that he is desperate for a drink, and although he chose this job with its isolation as an excuse to not have any access to alcohol, it's the fact that he's sober that drives him mad. There are some differences between the characters of Wendy and Danny in the movie and the series as well. Wendy in the movie, played by Shelley Duvall, is fairly timid and quite mousy, and you get the impression that she is a victim of abuse in some way. She's really frightened to get on the wrong side of Jack and doesn't want to upset him. Whereas in the series, where she's played by Rebecca De Mornay, she's a lot braver. Danny is an interesting character. Like I said in the synopsis, he has this special ability called the Shining, where he can telepathically connect with other people who share this ability, as well as the spirits within the hotel. Now, in the movie where he's played by Danny Lloyd, he doesn't really have anything else to offer. Apart from the fact that he has these special abilities, he is just an ordinary child who's kind of forced to stay within this hotel and doesn't really have much say in the matter. His encounters with the spirits of this hotel are nothing to do with his desire, he just kind of stumbles upon them. Whereas in the series, where he's played by Cortland Mead, he's a lot braver. He kind of connects with the spirits in the hotel in a deeper way and really does connect with the hotel itself. He has a much deeper desire to explore the grounds of the hotel. Both the movie and the series play on Danny's curiosity, but it's within the series that Danny really does want to cure that urge. Another thing that I mentioned in the synopsis is that the previous caretaker, Grady, lost his mind and killed his family. In the movie, it was explained that he used an axe and butchered them, whereas in the series, he used a giant croquet mallet. From what I've researched, Stanley Kubrick chose an axe in his adaptation as opposed to a croquet mallet because he thought it was a bit too cartoonish. Honestly, the idea of using a mallet didn't really bother me. As far as I know, that is from the original source material, and the idea of being stuck in a hotel with a madman wielding a blunt instrument is just as scary as someone with an axe. That being said, an axe has a bit more of a slasher feel to it, and I suppose it fits the horror genre a little bit more. Okay, so we've covered some differences, as in like the characters, their personalities, how they've developed, and the weapons that were wielded. What other differences are there? Well, there is a room within the hotel that holds some morbid history, a room that Danny has been told to stay away from. Now, in the series, I believe it's the same in the book, the room is 217, but in the movie it's 237. I suppose I've been a little bit lazy here and should have done a little more research on this, but I actually don't know the reasoning behind it. But as far as I'm aware, 217 is the original number from the book, and the series stays faithful to that. Either way, from the movie to the series, despite the change in the number, the room still holds the same significance. Now, as you can imagine, there are so many differences between the film and the series that I won't be able to cover every minor detail, but one of the biggest changes is the use of the hedge animals on the grounds of the hotel. In the series, and I do believe it's the same as the book also, there are hedge animals on the grounds of the hotel. Hedges that have been trimmed to look like lions and other wild animals. These animals have the ability to come to life and actually attack the Torrance family. In the movie, however, they don't have hedge animals, but there is a hedge maze. It's quite a large maze, fairly impressive too, and it's also a big part of the climax of the movie, as well as kind of paying an homage to the original source material. And without giving away any kind of major spoilers, the movie and the series have two completely different endings. With all of these differences in mind, a good question to ask would be, is there much difference between the stories of these two mediums? And in a way, not really. A family of three are stuck inside a haunted hotel during the winter months. One of them has psychic abilities and the other one loses his mind and wants to kill the others. It's kind of the same, but the differences do have an effect on the feel of the story. The series is more of a supernatural ghost story. It relies heavily on the fact that the hotel is haunted. The hotel almost feels like a character itself, in fact, and really likes to show off that it has a morbid, murderous history. The movie, on the other hand, is more of a psychological horror or thriller. Yes, the hotel is haunted, but that's only a minor aspect to the story. The main focus is on Jack's character and how he develops and starts to slowly lose his mind. The mini-series also focuses on Danny's shining abilities a little more too, which is kind of fitting really, considering the title is The Shining. In fact, the more I think about it, Danny's abilities in the movie are quite minimalistic. Considering the film is called The Shining, it doesn't really focus on it in a big way. Is that 1 point for the series? Are we giving that to them? Let's talk about the acting for a moment. Now, a lot of people who have seen the series have bashed it heavily, mostly due to the fact that they think the acting is terrible. Now, when I watched it, I didn't think it was that bad. Yes, it's not great. It's typical kind of TV acting, if you like. It's not Oscar-worthy, but it was fine. It did the job. I didn't really have a major issue with it. Granted that this is a three-part series, and I did feel like the actors kind of grew into their characters midway, but again, it didn't affect me that much. On the other side of the argument, I've heard people say that Jack Nicholson overacts in the movie. Now, for me personally, I kind of agree, but at the same time, I felt like it was intentional. After all, his character does go mad, and I do feel like his character is completely insane towards the end of this film. Not to mention that Shelley Duvall, who plays Wendy in the movie, really comes across as genuinely frightened of Jack. Now, from what I've researched, I read that Stanley Kubrick had some very unorthodox style of directing. I hope this isn't true and it is something I've read, but apparently he was a bit of a bully on set and quite mean towards Shelley Duvall, reduced her to tears. Now, I understand that, directors get frustrated and they want to get the best out of their actors, and sometimes they just have an artistic vision, but there's no excuse for bullying. Again, this is only something I've read online. I don't know if it is true. I hope it isn't, but apparently that was the case. Despite all of that, and like I said, it's no excuse, but Shelley Duvall actually does play a great role in this movie and really does come across as genuinely frightened for me. Let's talk about the visuals. In the movie, there's some fantastic cinematography. Like I said, Stanley Kubrick, a fantastic director and has some great vision, but he also uses some tremendous POV shots which really puts you into the perspective of the person that's in the room or in the scene at the time. And the visuals really do marry up well with the music in the film, which I'll get onto later. But there's a cracking scene where, like I said, it's a POV shot where we see, I think it's Jack's character entering a room, and there's a pulsing heartbeat going at the same time, and it really does build up the tension. In the mini-series, the visuals have not aged particularly well, mostly because they use CGI, and it's 90s CGI, and it's not of movie quality. But I'm not going to bash it too much, because at the end of the day, the series didn't have the same budget as the movie, and the CGI is tolerable. I suppose the most noticeable moment for the bad CGI is when the hedge animals come to life. But look guys, it is what it is. It's a TV series. So if we just quickly mention the music then. The music in the series is fine. I don't really have a major problem with it, but it doesn't create the same tension and atmosphere as the movie. The movie just manages to execute everything so well, from the visuals to the audio. It's absolutely spot on. And despite the fact that the movie came out in 1980, it still holds up today. So comparing these two does seem quite unfair, because it does feel like a case of David taking on Goliath. The movie obviously had the higher budget and had the greater means of reaching an audience. But is the series really as bad as people make it out to be? In my opinion, no. I actually thought it was quite entertaining and I enjoyed watching it, but I didn't feel like it had much rewatch value. Granted, a lot of Stephen King's novels have been made into movies, but a lot of them have also been made into TV series as well, and this one is just another one to add to the list. Let's just pretend, for instance, that the movie never existed. Just completely erase it from your mind, and this was your first time experiencing The Shining as an on-screen adaptation. It's actually a worthy entry. But I watched it recently, and if you were to ask me if I'd watch it again, the answer would probably be no. It's by no means perfect, but I'm not going to pick holes in the low budget or the acting or the visuals. The main issue I have with it is just not well executed. I feel like it could have been told in a 2-part series as opposed to 3. I know it's more faithful to the original source material, but that doesn't mean it's better. Personally, I'm not a fan of the hedge animals, I'm sorry. I just feel like it makes it feel more like a fantasy story than, say, a horror story. And I don't mean because they visually look terrible in the series. I mean, just the idea of it doesn't do it for me, I'm afraid. I also find that Jack's character is just a little bit too plain as well, and he takes too long to develop his madness. It's not until the 2nd episode that we see some real kind of crazy scenes, and we don't even see any ghosts until the 2nd episode also. In comparison to that, I've heard people say that the movie is long-winded and people have found it boring. Personally, I don't. I think it's a great movie, but hey, each to their own. All I would say in argument to that is, I think that Stanley Kubrick was trying to capture the essence of what Jack was going through. I mean, it's not an excuse to bore your audience, but, you know, Jack was bored, and I think he was just trying to press that onto his audience. Personally, I don't think that the movie is boring, but hey, each to their own. Look, if I'm going to pick a favourite between the two, yes, it is an unfair competition, I'm afraid. The movie is obviously going to come up trumps, in my opinion, okay? But you're entitled to yours. All I would say is, for those that have bashed the series, it's not that bad, guys. It's really not. Okay, it's not great, but it is still totally worth a watch and quite interesting. Anyway, guys, what do you think? Have you seen both versions of The Shining? Have you read the book? Let me know what it's like. I do intend to read it at some time. Do you agree with what I've said? Do you disagree? By all means, let me know your opinions, guys. It's not all down to me. Personally, I prefer the film, but I know there are some of you out there that do love the series. Give me your valid arguments. I want to hear it. I suppose another question is, how does Dr. Sleep compare to this? I haven't actually seen it yet, so no spoilers for me down there, okay? I do need to watch it. Anyway, thank you so much for tuning in, guys, and until next time. I don't know who they are, but if you don't subscribe, they will get you. So make sure you hit that subscribe button, click the notification bell so you don't miss out on any new video here on Monster Gab. Make sure you like this video if you did indeed like it, and leave a comment. Until next time, thank you very much, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.